Good afternoon, everyone. And my goodness, what an audience. I didn't quite realize how many people there actually were. I was sitting up front waiting to get started, and suddenly our audience doubled. For those of you who I have not yet had the opportunity to meet, I am Ann Fortescue, and I have the privilege and pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the International Museum of Art and Science. This is indeed a momentous occasion in the museum's history. Hosting paintings of Spanish America from the Carl and Marilynn Thoma Foundation is indeed an honor for IMAS. And it simply wouldn't be possible without the remarkable efforts and advocacy of Dr. Catherine Moore McCallum, IMAS trustee, director for the Center for Latin American Arts, the Mary Alice Sherry Shivers Chair in Fine Arts, an associate professor in the School of Art and Design at UTRGV, and the recipient of a Marilynn Thoma postdoctoral fellowship in Spanish colonial art from the Carl and Marilynn Thoma Foundation. Before I turn the program over to Catherine and Veronica, I want to share just a brief personal reflection about this exhibition. I was one of a few IMAS staff members that had the opportunity to Catherine's graduate seminar on the early modern and modern period of Latin American art last fall. And I see some of my classmates in the crowd. I loved being back in the classroom as a student. And it's a rare privilege for a museum director to experience a trustee in their element, the way I did as Catherine. As a student in Catherine's class. And it really gave me newfound admiration for her scholarly expertise and her impact as a teacher. So, Catherine, Veronica, take it away.
Thank you all for coming today. It's an honor to have your presence and your time on this cold and rainy day in South Texas. My name is Dr. Catherine McCallum, and I'm the director of the Center for Latin American Arts and a part of the UTRGV family, and it's a real honor to have this chance to bring this collection to you and to have the relationships with my friends and colleagues here at this table today to share their incredible knowledge in the field of Latin American art. And I wanted to thank very much Carl and Marilynn Thoma for all of their generosity and for being here today and for showing the true spirit of collaboration and kindness by lending their collection. And at the heart of their connoisseurship and collecting since Marilynn first started in 1997 is a true appreciation for education and for giving back. And it's a real honor to see our UTRGV and STC students here in South Texas get to learn and research and study this collection and see the artworks in person and have that unique learning experience. So I wanted to thank the Thoma Foundation for everything that's gone into making this exhibition possible. I also wanted to thank my friend and colleague, Veronica Munoz Najar, who is the curator of art of the Spanish Americas, along with Susanna Stratton-Pruitt, and thank her for her hard work and for the team at the Thoma Foundation, Madison Spencer and Megan Robson, and everyone else there that has helped make this a success. I'd like to introduce Veronica briefly as my co-moderator for this roundtable and have you welcome her here today.
Thank you, Catherine. So we also, from the Thoma Foundation, we are really grateful for the IMAS team, and we want to thank Director Ann Fortescue, and then Anastasia Perez, and Marcelo Ramirez Garcia Rojas, our venue curator, Andrew Drogo, and the Board of Trustees, and all the staff for their contributions to make this exhibition and related programs such a success.
Thanks, Veronica. And we are going to go ahead and start, without further ado, our roundtable. And we just left UTRGV, where we had a wonderful student-led research roundtable. And our students had some wonderful questions and generated some great conversations this morning. So we're excited to continue those today. And we are going to introduce our panelists today one by one, and they're going to give a brief presentation about this exhibition and about their own research. And we hope that this exhibition today shares some histories and new perspectives and helps inspire our students and our community and all museum visitors to think more deeply about material culture, localized art production, and the history of art from the early modern to the contemporary with new perspectives. And so I will go ahead and introduce the first speaker, my dear friend and former PhD advisor and a great leader in our field, Tom Cummins. He's the Dumbarton Oaks Professor of the History of Pre-Columbian and Colonial Art in the Department of the History of Art and Architecture at Harvard University. He's also the director of the Dumbarton Oaks Research Center in Washington, D.C. And Tom is a man that holds many hats and wears many hats. He's not wearing one right now, which is unique. He has been a seminal leader in our field and, most importantly, a wonderful mentor. And I learned everything I know about mentoring my students because he was an incredible mentor to me in my doctoral marathon. And I'll never forget what he taught me and how to lead and how to give back and how to nurture the next generation of students. So I'm very thankful for him. I cannot read his whole bio because it is too long and it is amazing, but I will just say that Tom's research and teaching focuses on both pre-Columbian and Latin American colonial art in both Mexico and South America and the Viceroyalty of Peru. And he has been a professor of art history at the University of Chicago, where he was there from 1991 to 2002. He was the director of the Center for Latin American Arts there. And then when he moved to Harvard, he was the director of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies at Harvard University. He's taught in Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, and Peru. And he is currently the co-director of the Getty Foundation Connecting Art History Grant titled Afro-Latin American Art, Building the Field 2022 to 2026. Please join me in welcoming Tom.
Well, it's amazing to see so many people here to enjoy this collection. I want to thank Marilynn and Carl. Especially, it's wonderful that you're here to enjoy this with us. And I'm just going to launch right in because we've been given a very brief amount of time and we all have a lot to say, more than you want to hear. But so I have slides, but I will describe them. If I could have the first image. There we go. So I just want to talk about, we were asked about this exhibition, what it means for a scholar, and then to talk a little bit about projects. There's two books that I'm working on right now. And so the first is about collections, Images as Witness. It's a book that I'm just finishing for Colombia, actually. The title is Imagen como Testigo. And then about sources, what they mean. And so if we could have the first one, next one, please. Those who can't see, this is Dumbarton Oaks. This is a building by Philip Johnson, probably his best, and the pre-Columbian collection that was begun by Robert Bliss with his first purchase of a pre-Columbian piece in Paris in 1912. What this means is that, like the Thomas, they created collections that then wanted them to be a part of the intellectual world through which they came. And it is a collection that is made primarily of a historic garden, pre-Columbian, next please, and Byzantine. Those are their interests, and it's very much like Carl and Marilynn, and Marilyn's interest is in colonial Indian, and Carl, if I'm not mistaken, is really contemporary art. And how do you bring these things together? And I had the advantage, next please, of discovering two portable altars. One that comes from the 11th century Germany, and one that comes from Mexico from the 16th century. And one is covered with porphyry, and one is covered with obsidian. And a chapter I'm writing in a book about the metaphysics of materiality is, what is this transformation from porphyry? And all porphyry, I should say, in the 11th century is spoliate. That is, it's cut down from other pieces of classical porphyry, because the mines were lost. They're in Upper Egypt. Nobody knew where they were until the 19th century. So all of this is cut down and reworked. It's the same thing with obsidian. Obsidian was a material that was dedicated to Tezcatlipoca, the god of trickster god, god of royalty. What unites porphyry and obsidian to become the altar where the Mass is said? What is it about these two materials? I don't have time to talk to you about this. You have to wait till the book comes out. But it's the collection. It's actually seeing these things together that provoke a question about why. What were the Franciscans thinking about when they took a metaphysical material, obsidian, which was so important to pagan religion, just as porphyry was, to become the surface for the most important part of Christian celebration and ritual. And so I will leave you with that, but it's the collection that allowed this to happen. I shall say also that this collection in this house is also where the United Nations began. It is a historic place that brings together not only materials but people with the hope of a better future. And we preserve that there with that intention. And when Dumbarton Oaks was given to Harvard University, it was given in 1940. And the letter that was written at that point by Mildred Bliss is, if now in this time of dislocation and disturbance, humanities, the humanities, is more important now than ever. And that's emblazoned on our walls with the idea that we have a responsibility to preserve this, not for now, but for the future, for future citizens of the United States and the world. And so when you have that legacy, as you see here, it is important to understand what stands behind it. Next slide, please. The next project is La Imagen del Testigo, and I show you two individuals who are in a cartoon. One is an artist, his name is Jan Vermeyen, and the other is Felipe Guevara. One is from the lowlands, one is from Spain. They're standing together, and the reason they're standing together is, next slide please. They were at the reconquest of Tunis by Charles V. And these are the most important tapestries that Charles V ever owned. He took them with him everywhere. And they are huge, and you can see them, well, only one because they're so large, in the palace still in Madrid. But the point is that Vermeyen did all of the painting there. He was what you would call now an inserted artist or reporter. That's what he did. All of that imagery there, he drew there, redid, and then was made into a very expensive set of 16 tapestries. And you can see them right standing, talking to each other. But Felipe Guevara is the next slide, please. Is just as interesting because he wrote the first art history book in Spain, Comentarios de la Pintura. And it was because of him and his father that Bosch is in the collection of El Prado, as well as a number of other very famous paintings. Why is that important? Because that's the foundation of the collection of El Prado. That is, these are people who are participating as witnesses to events, as well as collectors themselves. And what's interesting about the Comentarios de la Pintura is that Guevara says in there, he has a history of Bosch, he's the first person to mention Bosch. Next slide, please. Is that he says, if there's one thing that's new and extraordinary in painting, it's feather painting from Mexico. He's the first one to acknowledge it as painting and as equivalent to anything that's being done in Europe. And these are two examples of feather paintings. One is the Mass of St. Gregory, and the other is St. Michael. And he talks about that. And the next slide, please. He also describes Mexican codices and their precision of what they tell you as witnessing different information. So the first history of art written by somebody from Spain is also the history of collecting for the Prado, for Charles V, and then Philip II. The Bosches, when you go to the Prado, the Bosches you see there were given to Philip, or Felipe Guevara is the one that got them for Philip II. And I'm just going to quickly finish up here. Next, please. I have no time. The other aspect is images that actually witness something. And this is a drawing that is in the archive in Simangas. It is a drawing by the Cacique de Turmeques, that is a site in Colombia. He goes to Spain to argue the case of his community and the malfeasance that the Spanish are oppressing his community. And what this drawing shows is his brother who's died. He is in prison in the back, so it conflates two different times and places. But if you can see, and many of you can't, there's a little hand that's going like this next to him in the back where he's in prison. That is like underlining. If you look at any kind of document or book from the 16th century, they don't underline, they have a finger that points right to it. This is important. And what's interesting is that the text says to the king, look at this is what you've done. So that these images, and there's a number of these kinds of legal images that are presented as documents of what has happened that the king could never see. So they are as important as anything written in a legal document. And it is more economical. It allows you to see exactly his brother is dead, his family is in chains, and he's in prison. This is something that I'm writing about right now. The next one, please. This is about sources and collections. This is a plate that comes from a shipwreck of 1622. It was uncovered by Mel Fisher, who created a museum in Key West, because that's where the ship went down in the hurricane. What you see there on the right is a silver plate that comes from that collection. And it's an interesting plate because it is in the shape and form of an Inca type of plates that you see in ceramics right there. And in the middle of it is a coat of arms, but within that coat of arms is a maíz capacha. Maíz capacha is the crown of the Inca king. It's a red fringe that's been etched into that. This is a conflation of different kinds of imagery that occur in a type of vessel that is Inca-inspired, but it's being sent to Spain. The reason I'm showing you that is, next please. This is a drawing. This is the Met Museum. It's exquisite. It is the drawing by Goltz of the myth of Phaeton. He steals Apollo's chariot. He goes towards the sun. Apollo then upsets the chariot, and that's what's seen right here in this drawing that's in the collection at the Met. Next one, please. And this is the print that was made after that. That we don't know who actually did the print, but this is the print. The drawing was done around 1606. The reason I give you that date is that this is what collections allow you to do. This is why collections for a scholar are fundamental to the work we do. Because, next one please, that's a plate that comes from the Atocha, 1622. This was cast and made in Potosi, in Bolivia. What it's showing you, and you can't see it very well, is Phaeton. It's the same image, and that's the drawing of it, and that is the plate. And what you can't see in there, because it's too small, is that it is this mythical scene, but in the background are llamas. That is, it's conflating the world of the Olympian gods and the high silver mine in Potosi that's being shipped back to Spain. And where does it come from? Next one, please. It comes from that print. I saw this plate because I worked with this collection in Key West, and I called a friend of mine who is an expert, Peter Parshall, in prints, and I said, Peter, I know this is coming from print. Where is it? God, I don't know. I don't know. And then about 10 days later, it's at the Met. I found it. And so this is linking these two different, radically different collections that allow you to speak one across the other if you have the time and you have those collections. That's what's as important as any single piece, is that you can interweave works. That, next please. As you can see there, the next one please, and I'll end with this. That is the source of that. That's Raphael's, well, it's Dente's print of Raphael's St. Michael that then comes to Mexico. That is in the British Museum, in the Museum of Fine Arts of Boston. That is at the Met, that print. And I knew that it had to be a print. And so, you know, have the ability to, nowadays, to look at these collections and see what has been done from one medium to another by one of these great feather artists of Mexico. And I think I have one more, and that's it. That is it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Now we're going to introduce Carmen. Carmen Fernández-Salvador is Professor of Art History at the Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. She has published various studies on colonial and 19th century art and on the historiography of Ecuadorian art. Her book, Encuentros y Desencuentros con la Frontera Imperial, la Iglesia de la Compañía de Jesús de Quito y la Misión en el Amazonas del siglo XVII, was published in Madrid and Frankfurt by Iberoamericana Berber in 2018. Currently, Carmen collaborates in Spanish-funded projects for the study of early modern Jesuit art. She coordinates the project, the Amazon Basin as Connecting Borderland, examining cultural and artistic fluidities in the early modern period, sponsored by the Getty Foundation.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Catherine and Veronica, for inviting me to participate in this roundtable. I'm so happy to be here. It's my second time in Texas, I have to say, and I'm also very happy to see Carl and Marilynn here. I'm going to talk about something different, not necessarily about collections. I'm going to talk about some of my research interests that have to do with women in the arts. And right before we started the roundtable, I was talking to Rosario, and she said that the great colonial art collectors in the United States are women, like Marilynn. So, this is for you, Marilynn. And can we start my presentation, please? So I'm just going to read one tiny thing, because it's basically the first testimony that I have found so far about a woman artist in Quito. And it's something written by a Jesuit author who says, a noble woman of the city of Quito gave the Jesuit church 2 beautiful statues made by her own hand, one of Our Lady and the other one of the Archangel Saint Michael. This is a very devout and pious woman, and even though she hasn't had anyone to teach her, she makes statues with such beauty that the most excellent sculptor has something to see in them. She sculpts, gilds, estopa, which is basically adorns with polychromy, and varnishes, all of them different trades, and what she graciously received from God's hand, she offers with great generosity to his churches. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we see the first slide? Next slide. Okay, so that was the text.
That's the text.
Yeah. The next one, please. Okay, so what I wanted to do is show you different images or different slides where we can actually see women artists, so we can infer that these paintings were made by women. Because even though the Jesuit author is right to say that it was very difficult for a noble woman, especially who had to have received training in an artisanal workshop, there is evidence in Quito that there were lots of women learning the arts and practicing them. And I wanted to show, I don't know if you can see the text. No, nothing at all. Sorry, but this is a painting that is currently in the monastery or the convent of La Concepcion in the city of Cuenca, and it's a painting that depicts the Virgin of Mercy, and it's actually a beautiful painting that is decorated or adorned with gold leaf, right? It's gilded. It's really a rich painting. And can we see the next one, please? So there's an inscription that says, and I'm going to read it since you can see it. Yo, Sor María de la Merced, hice esta obra el año de 1751. María de la Merced, the nun, María de la Merced, made this painting in the year 1751. This is something very rare because normally women wouldn't sign their paintings, especially if it had to do with nuns, right? I believe that probably this is connected to the fact that this was part of a dowry. That is, the nun may have given this when she entered the convent or maybe a little bit later to seal this type of contract that has to do with the dowry. Can we see the next one? Tom, you remember this one, right? Yes. So I started to work with this manuscript, or at least studying this manuscript when I was still in graduate school at the University of Chicago. And it's a beautiful manuscript that is, I mean, It has basically 1,000 pages, right? It has 3 volumes, so it's a great manuscript that at the moment when I was still in graduate school, I believed that it was made. I was more interested in the representation of spirituality or mystical experiences, and I really did believe at the time that it had been written and put together by the nuns confessor. So this is the life, and obviously you cannot see it, but it is the life of Gertrudes de San Ildefonso. Gertrudes was nun of a poor Clarice nun who lived in Quito at the end of the 17th century. So, as many other nuns from the period who were having mystical experiences, when she started having these experiences, she went to her confessors, and the confessors requested her to give them her testimonies, written testimonies. But she wasn't just giving them their testimonies, but she was also giving him, this person, drawings of her mystical experiences, like this one, for example. And when I started writing about this nun, I did believe that maybe there was like a professional painter or artist who was making these drawings. And can we see the next ones? See these other drawings that are really strange, and really, they are very different from other depictions or other mystical experiences from the period. And my belief at first was that she was giving the confessor these drawings, and he was copying them and introducing them in the text. But more I think about it, I don't think that was possible, because the confessor was this Carmelite priest who was basically on his own in Quito. So there's no way that he would have had the means or the resources to put together this volume. So I do believe that this was the enterprise of the nuns, or the enterprise of Gertrudes herself. So can I see the next one? Okay, I'm going to have to read my notes because I can't see what it says here. This is her coat of arms, and it's a beautiful coat of arms, and it's the only page in the manuscript that is illustrated in full color. And for the people who can actually see what is going on here, there's this beautiful hand that holds the banner, and you can see that the hand is depicted in foreshortening, right? And the coat of arms was inserted in the manuscript to prove that she belongs to a family of old Christians, that is, they were not recently converted Jews, for example. The coat of arms is decorated with gold leaf, so it's a very rich painting, a very rich image. And what it says, this is what she says: for God's honor and glory, I present in this small drawing the arms, emblem, and nobility of my house. This is a declaration or an affirmation that she is the one who's actually making the drawings. So what I think is that contrary to, and then can we see the other one? The next one? Yeah, this is great, because you can see Gertrudes, who's actually holding the quill in his hand, and at this moment, she's writing something on the page. And what is particularly interesting is that we see the traces that she's leaving on the page. So in a way, the artist is really preoccupied or concerned with showing the viewer that there's a connection between her hand and the drawing and the manuscript. And I think that this is very interesting, because it does suggest this strong connection between the woman and the painted page or the drawn page. And I wanted to compare this drawing with this engraving on the right that depicts Pedro de Diaz Morante, I'm sorry I couldn't remember his name, who was a calligrapher. And this volume, which is a manual of calligraphy, was printed at the beginning of the 17th century. And you can see that his gesture is very similar to Gertrude's. That is, I mean, he's also holding the quill in his hand. My point here is that to answer the Jesuits' statement, right? How did this noble woman learn the trade? It is possible that many of the nuns were learning to, or training themselves for the art of painting by studying manuals of calligraphy, and because they were also practicing their trade, or they were also making illuminated manuscripts like this one here. So I'm trying to think that these colonial convents were very much like the medieval scriptoria, where just as monks, nuns would be trained in the art of drawing, because basically that is what calligraphy teaches you. They were trained in the art of drawing, and then they would become painters as well. And can we see the next one? And I'm showing you this on the left. It's a beautiful book that depicts yeah, but I wasn't going to say just letters. I want to say that it's a book of calligraphy, and it's Juan de Iciar. And on the right, I'm showing you these two beautiful pages that come from the Jesuit library, actually. And those were pages, unfortunately the people who are on the left probably can't see this, but that they depict these incredible drawings that were made by the priests, who were all actually using this manual of calligraphy that is on the left. So the same things that the men are doing in the colleges or in the monasteries are the women doing too in the convents. Can we see the next one? And Gertrudis was not alone, and this is a beautiful manuscript that was made in the late 18th century by the nuns of the convent of El Carmen Alto in Quito. This is a great manuscript because it basically copies a book. So it's the rule of the Carmelite nuns. And these Carmelite nuns in the late 18th century decided to copy the whole manual. And to me, this was an exercise, obviously, that had to do with spirituality. You know, making art or doing manual work was supposed to be a good company or companion to spiritual exercise, to spiritual meditation. But it also had to do with the training of the hand. And this is fantastic because, as you can see, they have completely adorned the page. And especially on the right, it is evident that they are also using the pan de oro, or the gold leaf that we saw in Gertrude's page as well on the coat of arms. And the next one. I wanted to show you these pictures that are from the convent of El Carmen Alto in Quito. And this is the life of Santa Teresa de Avila, who's the patron saint of this order, evidently. And on the left, there's the first scene that depicts Saint Teresa when she's entering the convent of La Encarnación in Madrid, right? And on the right is one of the visions that Saint Teresa has. Can we see the next one, just for a bit? So these are murals that were made probably after 1755, and we know that because in 1755 the monastery or the convent, the second floor was destroyed during an earthquake, and at that moment they redid these murals, and it was probably the nuns who painted them because this is a cloister, so it was very difficult for men to access these more private places, right? But what I would like you to see is that there's a difference between the painted murals and the engravings that they were based on. The engravings are from the early 17th century when Saint Teresa was canonized. And on the left, they depict the same scene, but Saint Teresa is shown as a quiteña from the late 18th century, you know, with those beautiful garments. Can we go back to the other one? And on the right, I didn't bring the engraving, the original engraving to compare it to this scene, but you can see that the Virgin has this beautiful crown, and Saint Joseph Saint Joseph is very different from the print, because in the print Saint Joseph looks like this older man, but in this case he's a handsome man, right? But the Virgin Mary has this beautiful crown that is adorned again, in this case not with gold leaf, but with brocateado, which is basically this the gold that is applied with a brush, not with a brush. And so it's a very rich image too, that also reminds us of this page, ornamented page in Hercules' manual. And can we see the next one? Oh, then the next one, please. And I love this because it's, and this is the last thing that I'm going to show you, but on the left, there's Archangel St. Michael who's holding the scale, and well, the people who are on the first row can probably see that, but the two figures that are on the scale are Carmelite nuns. I love that. The tiny Carmelite nuns. But then there's a text below this painting, and can you see what's on the bottom? No one can see what's on the bottom. No, it's a calligraphic drawing again. So you have, again, there's this connection that has to do with the ornamentation, surface ornamentation, but also with calligraphy. So, well, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Our next speaker is Kristopher Driggers. Kristopher Driggers is the Associate Curator of Latin American Art at the San Antonio Museum of Art. He was previously Associate Curator of Latin American Art at the Tucson Museum of Art in Tucson, Arizona, so we're really excited that he is now in San Antonio, closer to us, and excited to collaborate with students in South Texas. And he holds a PhD in art history from the University of Chicago and a BA in history of art from Yale University. Chris's research and exhibitions have explored a wide range of indigenous arts from the Americas, including textiles from the Andes, the 16th century Quiche Maya story from the Popol Vuh, narrative arts in Mexico, and the contemporary resonances of ancient American art. He is currently working on an exhibition about the pigment Maya blue, an indigenous innovation with enduring resonances today. Please join me in welcoming Kristopher Driggers.
Thank you so much, and it's really a pleasure to be here at the IMAS, and I think I'm going to change, okay. I think this one is clearer. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all, and thank you so much to Catherine and to Veronica, to the Thomas, and to the institution for hosting us. As I look at this exhibition, I'm struck by many things. But one of the things that I really love is reading the Community Voices labels that the museum has commissioned to accompany the artworks. I think it's so important that these works of art are contextualized within the culture and with the people who live here in Rio Grande Valley. I'm sure some of you here in the audience are some of the authors of those labels, and to me that just makes this entire program really special. And it actually is one of the things that I kind of wanted to start with in terms of my contribution to this roundtable. I'm going to be thinking about where colonial Latin American art fits at the Art Museum, especially with the perspective of the San Antonio Museum of Art, where I'm the Associate Curator of Latin American Art. And also I'm going to be thinking a little bit about extending you an invitation to come and see our collections, to come and work with our collections. As you know, I'm sure we're just a few hours away. And if visiting this exhibition has created in you an interest in seeing colonial Latin American art, we have a colonial Latin American collection at San Antonio Museum of Art with many works of art that can be opportunities for further engagement. The one on the screen, actually, I wanted to start with because it has a very particular kind of connection to South Texas and to San Antonio. This is a work by the Mexican master artist of the late 18th century, Nicolas Enriquez, and it's a work that depicts the founding of a college in Querétaro through the allegory of a kind of mystical vision of the Holy Cross that takes the form of a beautiful kind of flowering, sprouting tree. And the San Antonio connection is that in this small painting on copper at the bottom right corner, we have the image of one of the kind of founding figures of the missions of San Antonio. And I'll ask you to click next, please. Fray Margil de Jesus, who founded the San Antonio mission system and was involved in a number of other projects in what was then the northern extension of New Spain. This work of art is stewarded at San Antonio Museum of Art and was acquired about a decade ago because it has this precise kind of connection to our local history. And as I'm looking around our gallery, I see that so many of these works of art, whether directly connected historically to South Texas, or with kind of broader spiritual and other kinds of heritage connections to the Americas, this is part of the story of telling, of kind of thinking about colonial Latin America here in South Texas. Next. There are lots of different kinds of ways in which colonial Latin American art can appear in a United States art museum. At some museums, the colonial collections are part of the American wing, right? They kind of go along with historical arts from the United States, and that's one kind of narrative that we sometimes see. In other institutions, the colonial collections are housed within the European wings of the museum. There, they become part of a story of European kind of imperial powers and their extension into the Americas and other places beyond Europe. But at San Antonio Museum of Art, the way that we have always contextualized our colonial Latin American collection is within a story about Latin America in its longue durée history. So we have an entire wing for Latin American art with 6 different galleries for different periods, including galleries for project spaces. I'm showing you 4 of those galleries here. We have an ancient American gallery. We have a gallery for colonial Latin American art. There are 2 photos of that at the bottom. I know it's quite small, but maybe you get a sense that those might be the materials in this gallery. On the right, we have a photo of our modern and contemporary Latin American art gallery. And then we also have a major collection of popular art. The core of that popular art collection was donated to San Antonio Museum of Art from the Nelson Rockefeller Collection of Mexican Folk Art. More about that in a second. But what I want to say for now is that at our institution, it's really important to think about the colonial within a longer story of artistic production and cultural activity in Latin America. And that affects the way that we show this work, and it also affects the kinds of connections that we can make within our collection. Thinking back to Professor Cummins' talk at the beginning of this, right, that oftentimes, what's important about collections is the kinds of connections that you can make between individual objects as much as one object itself. And at SAMA, because we have this longue durée collection, that affects the kinds of connections that we're able to kind of explore and demonstrate and investigate in our galleries. Next slide, please. SAMA has often taken on projects that mimic in some way or that are inspired by or influenced by that kind of thinking, this longue durée thinking. This project at the center and the project at the right, those were both projects that the museum has done in its history. The more recent is a show called Retratos, that was 2,000 years of Latin American portraits. So that's a show where you're seeing portraits of Maya rulers shown alongside portraiture by an artist like Diego Rivera, obviously from the early 20th century. In 1960, the museum did a show, Arte de México a través de los siglos, Mexican art across the centuries. It was a venue for a traveling show from Mexico by that title. And the show on the left was not shown at SAMA or any of its parent institutions. This is a show that kind of started this tradition of thinking about these big surveys of Mexican art across time. This is 20 centuries of Mexican art at the MoMA in New York. But though that wasn't shown at SAMA, a lot of our collection was, the Nelson Rockefeller collection was a core part of that exhibition. So many objects exhibited in that kind of a framework are now part of the SAMA holdings. Next slide. Briefly, I'll say that probably one of the most intensive efforts on the parts of the museum in this kind of vein, thinking about the long history of Mexico, came in the 90s when SAMA was the venue for Mexico's Splendors of 30 Centuries, which is a major, complicated, monumental kind of loan exhibition, probably so complex. I don't want to say this, but it may be true that it could never be replicated because of the kinds of works that were brought together for this exhibition. But that's the kind of thinking that, and the kind of project that has often been taken on at SAMA with its longue durée emphasis. Next. On a smaller scale, I wanted to mention a show that I did at a previous position at the Tucson Museum of Art. This was a show called Cumbi, Textile Society and Memory in Andean South America. And it was a show about the longue durée history of textiles in the Andes. And I mention it partly because it's an example of how this kind of thinking could be expressed outside of Mexico, right, 10th Street, Mexico, where we see these longue durée stories, but also because there was a very important loan for the exhibition from the Thoma collection, the painting at the center of the Child Virgin Mary spinning, which has been interpreted by some as a painting that speaks to the enduring kind of importance of cloth and textile work in the Andes into the colonial period and in colonial religious traditions. Here we see the Virgin Mary spinning raw fiber into usable kind of weavable thread in this painting. And I'll say too that I know that one of the things that's also so important about the Thoma collection and the Thoma Foundation's work is the work that it's done to support so many kinds of research projects at many different institutions across the country. So I'll add one more note of thanks to the Foundation for that kind of support and for making those projects possible. Next. So getting in, with the time that I have left in my comments, I wanted to show a couple of works of art from the collection, even if quite briefly. So here we're in our Colonial Latin American Gallery. Next slide. A few of the kinds of things that you can see if you visit San Antonio Museum of Art. The works that I've chosen as kind of representations here are works where I think you see a little bit of a kind of bleeding of categories, right, between colonial Latin American art and folk art or popular art, which is one of our big collecting areas, like I mentioned. This work is a monumental embroidery. It is an armorial hanging, which means that it was a textile meant for hanging in an armory from the city of San Luis Potosí in northern Mexico. It is, we believe, one of a kind. It's quite large. You see its dimensions there on the slide. And interestingly, it's kind of a local take on what would have been in a European great house, a tapestry hanging. But here, instead of weaving this as a tapestry, the artists have embroidered it really extensively, using many different colored wools across this very large surface. I'll add to thinking about collecting to represent local history that many families in San Antonio have connections to San Luis Potosí, and there's kind of a deep historical connection between the two cities. it's kind of part of the North, that made this a really compelling acquisition for the museum and something that can continue to be studied. Next. I'll also mention that within our popular art collection, we have things that speak to kind of popular religiosity in the Americas. This is a mask from the city of Toluca, representing a Roman soldier that would have been worn and performed with in a kind of religious, theatrical context in the late 18th century. Right now, it sits in our popular art gallery, but very well could be displayed in the colonial art gallery, speaking to, again, kind of some questions about how we think about these particular kinds of materials. Next. Similarly, the museum holds a monumental jar in ceramic from Tonalá in Jalisco. This was a recent acquisition. Next. And it comes from a community where ceramics are still made and painted. Our Tonalá jar, made at the end of the 18th century, was almost certainly made to be exported to Europe, where there was a great market for Tonalá ceramics. They were believed to perfume water and to have beautiful kind of salutary effects, to be good for health. And so they were really popular in European great houses. It's interesting to think about, and a connection that we can make because of our collection is thinking about that kind of a market alongside works being created by contemporary artists from the very same community using some of the same techniques and certainly the same kind of source of clay. And one more thing along that line, next. We also have historical examples of lacquered coffers, like this one from Holy Nala. Here's an 18th century example that, because of the kind of collecting we do, can be shown alongside. Next. Something like this electric green box, also lacquered from the very same kind of cultural context here, offering, I think, a very playful kind of take on depicting the biblical story of Adam and Eve. I think, if you don't mind taking me to the last slide, I want to make sure to leave time for my fellow speakers. But one more, there we go. I just want to wrap up by saying that, again, I think that as museums, we engage in collecting practices. Collecting is about choices, and it's about thinking about what will resonate within the particular context of the work where it's being shown. When we collect, a collection will have a different kind of meaning depending on where that collected object sort of ends up being displayed and who's engaging with it. And for me, that's a really exciting dimension of collecting in colonial Latin American art that I hope that when you visit the SAMA galleries, you'll see kind of expressed in our spaces. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Now I'm going to introduce Rosario Granados, who is the Marilynn Thoma Curator of the Arts of the Spanish Americas at the Blanton Museum of Art at the University of Texas at Austin. At the Blanton, in addition to 7 thematic rotations of the permanent galleries, Rosario has organized exhibitions mapping memory, space, and history in 16th century Mexico in 2019. And more recently, in 2022, she curated the show Painted Cloth, Rituals and Fashion in Colonial Latin America. Rosario is currently developing 2 new projects. The first one is entitled The Scholar Gaze, Modernist Portraits of 16th Century Mexican Architecture. And the second project is The Legacies of Belonging, Icons in Colonial Latin America and Latino Art, in collaboration with Dr. Claudia Zapata. Before coming to the Blanton in 2016, Rosario taught undergraduate and graduate seminars on religion, gender studies, and cultural heritage, and Latin American art at Skidmore College and at the University of Chicago. Rosario holds a PhD from Harvard University, an MA from the Fordham Institute of Art, and a BA from the Universidad Iberoamericana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne and Catherine, for the invitation to be part of this panel, and the rest of the team for this fantastic organization. Thank you, Carl and Marilynn, for the paintings, and thank you to all of you for being here and bear with us while we talk about our passions. Next, no, stay there. When Catherine asked us to prepare for this event, one of the questions she threw at us for consideration was how the Thoma Collection projects are essential for museums in the US and how transformative they have been for the art of the Spanish Americas. The first concept that came to mind when thinking about how to answer such a question was that of visibility, both as an active act of seeing, but also as an act of being seen. It was indeed an obvious concept because, next one, as you can see here, since 2017, the Thoma Foundation has organized or participated in evictions featuring art of the Spanish Americas in at least 23 institutions of all sizes. Through each one of these projects, supervised or organized by Susan Stratton Pruitt, Erin Fowler, Catherine Sadner, and more recently the amazing Veronica Munoz-Naja, and always overseen by Carmen Marilynn, the Thoma Collection has made the art of the colonial Andes visible to extremely heterogeneous audiences. I am not exaggerating. Just look at the wide range of institutions that they have lent work to. Large museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, el Museo del Prado, the Art Institute of Chicago, MFA Houston, Minneapolis Institute of Art, or the Nelson Atkins Museum. Next to medium-sized museums like the San Antonio Museum of Art, San Diego Museum of Art, and the almost next door Museo de Historia Mexicana in Monterrey, and Art Museum of South Texas in Corpus Christi. They have also prioritized museum art museums, highlighting the Carlos and Marilynn's commitment to education. So many institutions have been benefited from the Foundation's mission that, to display this art that is different and sometimes new to many audiences, that after I just sent the PowerPoint for this event, I realized that I forgot to include another Texas institution, which is Texas Tech Museum. It could be that I'm missing more than one because there are so many. The point here is visibility, the state of being able to be seen. And that is what this list shows, a crusade to show an alternative to the idea that the old masters were only European. This collection reveals the richness of the old masters of South America, which is essential not only because of the demographic change in the US, but also because it shows other ways of creation, other aesthetic resources that were not only possible, but that are worth of admiration. By expanding audiences and making its collection available, the Thoma Foundation has fortified the field at all levels, the market, the scholarship, the appreciation in general. Next. The Thomas efforts to make this art visible and accessible to many did not start in 2017, but a decade earlier, in 2006, through this exhibition with a very neutral title, The Virgin, Saints and Angels, South American Paintings from the Collection, 1600 to 1825. That I hope you have noticed already on the slide for those who can see it. Also traveled extensively outside the continental US, visiting Canada and Puerto Rico. It was also the first time that the Thoma paintings visited the Blanton, where I work now, which is a museum with a very long-standing display of Latin America since it was founded in 1963. We're actually the first museum that had curatorial position for Latin American art. Next. Through the show's main entrance, people were welcome at the Blanton to a sea of Andean creativity. And I say sea, next one, because all the paintings were painted in blue, and enhancing the 56 paintings that at that time Marilynn had collected for almost a decade. Today the collection has more than tripled, and I'm really glad because what we have here today in this exhibition are many of the recent acquisitions. The impact of these paintings, available then at the Blanton in 2008, is still felt to this day. And let me share a little anecdote. Last summer, I was at the St. Louis Museum of Art visiting the installation of a show organized by LACMA. And when I showed my ID to the man selling the tickets, and I introduced myself as the Marilynn Thoma Curator at the Blanton, not out of courtesy, I have to confess, but I wanted a free ticket. The man's eyes were wide open. And he proceeded to share that he clearly remembered this exhibition at the Blanton back in 2008. He explained that such exhibition was the first time that he had seen colonial art, understanding its relevance and appreciating its aesthetic and historical value. If I'm able to admire what we have here at St. Louis today, he said, it is because of that show that I saw in Austin so many years ago. This comment shows the results of visibility, because in order to be appreciated, understood, and questioned, you first need to be visible. And that is what the Thoma Collection has been doing for over 2 decades, making vice-regal South American art visible and accessible to many, like you can access today. Next one, please. I know firsthand about the power of visibility that the Thoma exhibitions provoke, because before working closely with the collection, I was also a visitor to one of those exhibitions. I had learned many things at Tom Cummins seminars in graduate school, where I actually met Catherine McCammon, but it was nevertheless breathtaking to see Our Lady of Bethlehem in a museum gallery. Teaching in front of it with University of Chicago graduate students from anthropology and theology enrolled in religious material culture course, one that I thought about just after having Kristopher Driggers in my other course on cultural heritage, was simply extraordinary. From that experience, they said that it was eye-opening. They felt captivated by this painting that they saw for the first time, and were excited to learn more about the pieces, other pieces in the collection, being able to see them and appreciating them in both shape, content, and function. My second experience seeing the collection was when I went to the Blanton to interview for what is still my dream job. I saw how other graduate students, mainly those in Susan Dean Smith and Jorge Cañizares' Guerra, interacted with the paintings, making their stories visible through the labels they were invited to write for the occasion. Now, next. Many years later, not as a surprise, Our Lady of Bethlehem was a key element in painted cloth, my first major exhibition at the Blanton. The painting was available to the visitors in a dark gallery, similar to what we have here, emphasizing its ritual use. Hence the subtle painted arch behind it, what I don't know if you can see it on the slide, and the benches in front. Thinking of this as a ritual artifact that needed people to see it in order to be activated. Visibility is, thus, more than just including paintings in an exhibition. It is an invitation to consider the original settings of the artwork and its social life, a life that changes along with the different viewers they meet throughout history, from church and devotees to gallery and art and museum goers. Next one, please. Visibility also means education, another key value in Carl and Marilynn's vision for these materials. The name we now refer to their collection is just a minimal token of such educational effort, because as we all know, arguing for a change in name is hugely symbolic. We name things as we want them to be seen and appreciated. Names make political statements. So, from the Spanish colonial that was first used at the MFA Houston, and now the vice-regal that they currently use, and the Spanish Americas that we started using at the Blanton in 2017, there are acute yet essential differences that persuade the recognition of how inventive these South American paintings are. Viceregal and Spanish Americas are categories based on geography and juridical and political status that certainly enhance the identification and appreciation of artistic imagination and skillful artistry, characteristics that are less evident when labeling it only as colonial that may persuade us to think them as secondary copies. Next one, please. One of my next curatorial projects is tied yet again to one painting in the Thoma collection. I imagine Our Lady of Cocharcas in dialogue with the Virgin of the Lake, and I'm launching this new exhibition tentatively named Legacies of Belonging, Icons in Colonial Latin American Art and Latino Art, with my colleague Claudia Zapata, the Associate Curator of Latino Art at the Blanton, seeking to connect not only past and present, but also symbolic geographies. We want to explore how Alejandro Romero, a Mexican muralist now living in Chicago, engaged with this particular South American iconography and transformed into a social commentary about immigrant struggles. Next one, please. We also look forward to pairing this portrait of New Mexico photographer Miguel Galdert with a rare mezzotint of Our Lady of Guadalupe made in the 1780s for a Mexican Jesuit living in Italy after the Spanish king expelled the Society of Jesus from all his territories. Both icons, the one on Teresa Gutierrez Juarez's back and the colonial print, show how the longing for a lost land translated in a strong community ties. Next one, please. The show will ideally include another unique pairing, the only complete series of casta paintings in the US that is now part of the Denver Art Museum collection, displayed in the same gallery along Michael Menchaca's La Raza Cósmica, a Chicanx interpretation of that unique Mexican genre that comments on what is to live between cultures. Next one, please. But let me end this brief presentation by returning to the Thoma paintings in the show that we celebrate today. I love, just as Chris mentioned, that the exhibition includes community voices through which we can explore further this theme of visibility as the state of being able to see, but also to being seen. Juan Garcia, for instance, when facing the portrait of Gregorio de Viana that we have over here, reflects on his legacy in the piece that he wrote, which is another way of thinking about how visible he will be in the future. Thus, the artwork functions a mirror not only of this Spanish bureaucrat in search of recognition of his deeds, but also of the board member in front of him, making clear that seeing the other is another way of seeing oneself. Visibility works both ways. The next one, please. Más personal, me resulta el comentario de Laia Vite, quien en la guía, en la cédula, comenta su conexión con el marco boliviano de la colección Thoma a través de la plata, mineral también crucial para la ciudad minera de Pachuca, Hidalgo, de donde es originaria su familia. En este caso, y por eso cambio al español, la visibilidad que permite ver y ser visto me resulta tan personal, porque tanto mi madre como mi padre nacieron en Pachuca, y yo pasé veranos enteros comiendo pastes en Real del Monte, that little town that she mentions in her comment. The Thoma paintings then allow these common legacies between the graduate student and the curator to become visible, palpable. I cannot imagine a better way to underscore the social role of this show and all the others organized by the Thoma Foundation. By bringing Viceregal Andean art to the spotlight and making it available, visible around or across the US, we see the other in the past, but we also see ourselves, and it's possible to cross time and space, consequently building bridges that connect McAllen with La Paz, with Potosí, with Quito, with Cusco, with Lima, even if briefly, and despite our very different backgrounds. What a joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosario. We are honored to have our speaker round out this wonderful round table. A dear friend and colleague and a very talented contemporary artist, Carlos Limas. Carlos Limas has a beautiful show that opens tomorrow, but it may as well open today because we're all going to visit it after this roundtable, called Destino Sur. Carlos has a background in graphic design from the Instituto Profesional de Arte y Diseño in Monterrey, Mexico, as well as a bachelor in studio art from l'Académie Royale des Beaux-Arts in Brussels, Belgium. And he also completed a master's in fine arts at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, where I've had the honor and pleasure to know him for the last few years and walk in the Andes and climb mountains and see him go to Choqquequirao and other places. And we're really happy to have you here today with us, Carlos. And his primary media is photography, and he also works in painting and video art. And he's exhibited at many solo and group exhibitions in regional, national, and international levels. And Carlos lives and works here in McAllen, and he teaches digital photography at South Texas College, where he also serves as the department chair. And it's been a real pleasure for UTRGV and STC to collaborate on this exhibition and Destino Sur and the workshops and roundtables that have come with it. So we're excited to have that collaboration. Join me in welcoming Carlos Limas.
Thank you so much. Well, so yes, I'm going to talk about Destino Sur. I would like first to thank Dr. McAllen and the Center for this invitation. It really is a pleasure. I have very fond memories working together at the center. And the center, while working there, gave me the chance to go back to Peru for the second time. So some of the photos you're going to see is just some of that material. Also, the photos I took were basically sneaking out after work and taking pictures. I also would like to thank the IMAS, which is Kim, and the incredible team here at the IMAS. This is the second time for me here, and I'm very happy. Also, I would like to thank Ricardo Solis, Dr. Ricardo Solis from STC. He gave me the chance to go to Peru, and it was like in my second week as chair. So he kind of, just looked the other way and let me go. So it was a good thing. And finally, Dr. Professor Romeo Di Loreto, who's around here, somewhere in fact. He's a real friend, also a photographer. He teaches photography at UTRGV. And he's a mentor to me, a real good friend, so he helped me a lot with this process to get those images. Okay, so spoiler alert, I'm not a historian, so we're just going to talk about my experience doing those 3 trips to Peru in the past 7 years. I consider myself an artist that loves to go out into the world and take pictures of different places, different cultures, looking for different experiences. Some people have a passion for things they love. I, on the other hand, have an obsession with photography. So yeah, I have issues. My relationship with Peru began back in 2018 while doing a master's at UTRGV. I took a history class with Dr. Robert Bradley. I say hi, he's feeling better. One of his assignments was to do research on different topics related to Peru. Can we play the video? The video is just going to be like a background image of the slides. I chose to do the Nazca lines, which are a group of geoglyphs of animals, plants, and geometrical shapes, which are in essence a group of large lines, drawings that appear from a distance to be etched into the Earth's surface. They extend over an area nearly of 190 square miles. Most of the Nazca lines were constructed more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. The Nazca lines are preserved naturally by the region's dry climate and by winds that sweep sand away from their grooves. So when I signed up for the study abroad trip to Peru with my class, I flew in a week in advance, so I could go directly to Nazca, board a small plane, and take pictures of everything in the ground. I also visited the Ballesta Islands and the Paracas Desert, discovering among other things underground rivers. It was more than I really expected, and simply put, it was a unique experience. I encountered a magnificent hillside called Maras. There were small pools of salty water full of rich minerals. More than 3,000 pools in total. Each one is run by one family, so they can produce what they called salt of Maras. My arrival to Cusco was nothing short of really magical. Having the chance to interact with different celebrations, Inti Raymi, or Sun Festival, which is the winter solstice festival of the Inca religion that celebrates the sun god and takes place every June. The celebration route begins in Coricancha, the ancient religious center of the Inca capital, where with dances and songs of offerings, and an offering is made to the Apu Inti, which is the sun god. Once the first act is finished in the esplanade of Coricancha, the attendees go to the main square plaza de Armas. The extensive field of the esplanades of Sacsayhuman is the site of the third and last act, where the Incas and its entourage arrive to pay their respects and admiration to the sun. The Inca prayers are recited in Quechua, and a simulation of a sacrifice is acted, usually done with a black llama, so that the shaman can predict the prosperity and well-being of the coming year. Corpus Christi is a Catholic festival that involves processions of saints and virgins. This festival is one of the most important in Cusco. It blends elements of the Catholic faith with Andean traditions. It brings together thousands of people from various communities, promoting unity and solidarity. Among those who participate in the procession, there are dancers and cultural and religious activities. Moreover, Cusqueños celebrate their identity and cultural heritage, showcasing the richness and diversity of their tradition to the world. In closing, because I don't have to keep this short, as a photographer from Mexico living in South Texas, my experience in Peru have deepened my understanding of Latin America, revealing both the shared history and the unique cultural nuances that define us. The similarities of a common past reinforce the idea that photography is more than just an act of visual documentation. It's an act of resilience, a way to preserving our stories and identities in a rapidly changing world. Each frame captures a spectrum of moments filled with emotions, nostalgia, and wonder that not only shape our artistic vision, but also serve as a bridge between memory and history. Through my lens, I witness the strength and vibrancy of everyday life, the echoes of tradition and modernity, and the unspoken narratives that connect people across borders. Photography reaffirms my sense of humanity and my identity as Latino.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Thank you. We have time for just one or two quick questions, but
On the bottom.
would anybody like to ask a big question? I know we're a little short on time, and we want to invite everyone to a reception to visit with our panelists a little bit more and say hello. But we'd love to ask if anybody would like to ask a question at this roundtable.
I have a question.
Okay, lovely.
So one of the things that we're talking about as we're discussing a lot of these works is these sort of tensions and moments of dialogue between the pieces. For example, like dialogues of humility existing alongside dialogues of abundance and opulence. And for Rosario, that anyone can jump in, I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about the sort of tension between representing sort of European models of these like religious icons and religious figures in the dress and the fashions of the vice royalty.
Thank you. Yes, what I see in the paintings is that there is a happy tension between what was imposed and what was reinterpreted and made own or local. And so I think the beauty of having these objects traveling around the US is that then you can see that history is not a linear process, but it can be messy, because life is messy, and that it's okay. And it reconciles, I think, with not only with our present, but also with the history of colonization, and make us think of how we do similar things. No, we dress sometimes in ways that are not completely ours, but it invites us to think in what ours means, no, and how we can put our own identity at play. And that's what I think this is when you can really bring these paintings into life, no? The work that we do with painted cloth was only like a pretext, because when you say fashion, look around, everybody's dressed. And it's easier to understand that process. But the paintings do that all the time with the interpretation of European models. And I think to understand kind of what Tom mentioned, no? and what Chris and Carmen, show us is that in the process of reinterpretation, that some people have called copy, there is much more involved. And there's always agency, and there's always artistry, and invention, and imagination. And I think that's,
I have a question, just one quick question, and it's a very generalized question for all us art lovers. And first of all, thank you for this beautiful exhibit. I'm looking at the paintings, and from a bird's eye view, it's definitely colonialism, right? And at the same time, I'm thinking it's post-Renaissance, is that correct? Of course, because it's colonialism. Is this after the Renaissance, or would this be categorized as Renaissance?
No, it's right. Colonialism begins, colonial really begins in 1492, and if you go to Santo Domingo, what you will see there in architecture, for example, you're right about these paintings being post-Renaissance.
Right.
But colonial art, and what I showed you are examples of featherwork that are based on high Renaissance imagery. That is Raphael. And so it goes from 1492 and 1494, really, when they start building Gothic cathedrals.
Yeah,
in
you
Southern
can see the
Mexico.
medieval and the liaison between medieval and Renaissance. So that's why it's so unique in that it's hard to, like you say, it's linear. It's beautiful. Thank you, thank you.
Any other questions?
I actually have one. If y'all, it's kind of like tying into his. If y'all could speak on like the aesthetical choices of the archangels, because when we were talking about it in class, we thought it was really interesting, specifically like the choice of weapons and fabric, and how it like kind of was utilized to capitulate Spanish authority. I don't know if anybody can speak on like the aesthetic choices of the archangels.
Okay, I guess I can. Well, I'm sure you know from class that one of the models is a book on weaponry and the orders for Dutch military that then gets incorporated into the militancy of archangels. And this only happens in this genre of painting, this genre of mixing the mystical and the military into a single painting only happens in Perú Alto in the south. I mean, you don't find it any other place. And so the question is a generative one. What generates this? We don't really know. We know we can, and this is where I think what Rosario was saying is that there is there in those paintings something that doesn't exist anywhere else. You can find the models. That is, we know that there are archangels that are dressed in this finery. We know the military manuals. But what is it then that generates a kind of painting that then is copied again and again and again, just as happens in European art? There's something alluring, something attractive, something that actually gains the attention of Andean communities, because these are all within Quechua and Aymara speaking churches. This isn't something that's coming out of the cathedral in La Paz or the cathedral in Cusco. It's coming out of a deep-seated sense of Catholicism mixed with a deep sense of Andean interpretation of what Catholicism is to those people. Part of it has to do with the catechism that goes along with damnation. And what isn't here are the images of hell. Those proliferate along with everything else you see here, and they are absolutely related to the sense of redemption and the possibility of damnation. And so the self internalizes this need for both salvation and devotion and stepping away from sin. And so there's, in the same areas that those paintings come from, there are paintings in Carabuco of hell in which practices that are Andean, music, drinking, etc., are depicted as the causes of going into the Mao of hell, which is a European image, but it's not European, it has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the universalism of the Catholic Church and its indoctrination, or doctrina, that's where we get indoctrination. But these things are all related and overlapping, and so the 16th sermon in the Third Council of Lima, which is written in Aymara and Quechua as well as Spanish, and to be read in these communities will tell literally this didactic moment where that is, you say here now, that's deixis. It says you turn around, look behind you, and what you're looking at is the painted, and he said, the priest will say, the painted image of hell. And so you have to think of these paintings, all of them as architectural as well. They're in a space surrounded by these images, both of salvation, of devotion, and damnation. And these angels are really going to protect you. That's what they're there for. And they're protecting you in the most immediate way, both as angels and as soldiers. I mean, it's just a really, to me, these are remarkable paintings of synthesis, of talking about authority that then is incorporated into the community and making it ours.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for participating in this roundtable. Thank you, Carlos, Rosario, Carmen, Chris, Tom, and Veronica. Thank you all so much. And can we get a round of applause? And we'd love to invite you all to please join us at a reception IMAS is generously hosting in Carlos Limas' exhibition Destino Sur in the adjoining gallery for some refreshments and continuing the conversations with our speakers and guests. Thank you all so much for coming tonight.